Hello, everyone, and Happy New Year's. I briefly wanted to get on here and just talk about what has been unfolding between Umar Johnson, Boyce Watkins, and Tariq Nasheed. Um, I want to look at this more so from a bigger picture, although I think there are a lot of things that we can say about each individual person. I do think that what happened, frankly, was anyone who connects to those people or connects to their message and has even maybe supported them. Realistically, in some way, I would think you were somewhat embarrassed by what happened, especially on in a public forum, a social media forum where anyone can see, any race can see, um, and any person, regardless of their position inside of politics and society, and any person has been able to see these people who have been leaders acting as children. And that does go for every one of them. I'm not picking sides on any of that, and I'm not necessarily commenting on the beef individually. But going into 2018, um, the way I wanted to look at this more so was what are we expecting from, well, number one, who are we calling our leaders, and what are we expecting from our leaders? Um, it's I've heard different debates that Black people, we don't necessarily need a leader. For example, in America, there's no leader of the Asian community. There's no leader of the any community, white community, so per se. Um, there's no leader, but Black people, we feel like we need leaders. I would say that that's not necessarily true. The people who got America to this place were initially leaders. If you know anything about the Continental Congress, and you know anything about people like Thomas Jefferson, Alexander Hamilton, um, James Madison, all these people, they were participants. They were leaders of this thing called America. It was a very small circle of people who actually ended up creating this agenda that became the American Constitution eventually. And these people were leaders. So when you think about that, when you think about the predicament we're in, previous to that, the white people in America were in a conflict because they were inside of a war for their independence. And they needed leaders to lead them to being independent and self-reliable. In the same way, when you look at the circumstance that we're inside of a system where we're dependent. We're inside of a system where we're depleted, we're exploited. And under those circumstances, and any circumstance of the need of a revolution, I would say that we do need leaders. So that being the case, though, how do we expect our leaders to behave? And I would say for me personally, I don't subscribe 100% to anyone because I haven't seen too many people nowadays who, I don't want to say are worthy of that, but who have exhibited consistently the building, the work ethic, the following consistently in the Black community for me to say I would stand behind that. For example, if I was alive in the 60s, I could tell you 100% I would be standing behind Malcolm X. If I was alive in the 70s, I'd be standing behind someone like Stokely Carmichael. If I was alive in the 90s, I would gladly be standing behind someone like Amos Wilson. I don't see anyone today who has, in the community, the Black community, built up the following to for me to say, okay, that's actually someone that came from us and not from the establishment appointing leaders over us. But also, not just that, but also having the foundation, having worked and having built something. All these people I mentioned, Malcolm was out there building, Stokely was out there building. I don't see anyone who has done that nowadays. Now, this isn't a criticism on anyone. I just personally have not come across someone who has exhibited themselves in that type of way. But at the same time, I will say that I have many times supported Boyce Watkins. I think that he's one of those people who, for me, is very sincere in his love for the community. He's very sincere, and that's one thing you can't take away from him. He's sincerely, unapologetically, and in a way that exhibits self-sacrifice, has put himself on the line in a way for the Black community. Similarly, for Umar, I've seen certain traits in him that I very, very much like. He's very charismatic. I mean, no one can take that away from him. Everyone's so stuck on, does he have a degree in this? Does he have a degree in that? But no one can deny that Umar Johnson is a hell of a speaker publicly. He's a hell of a debater. If you see him on Roland Martin, you see him take down 3 or 4 people all by himself. That you have to have a certain skill, a certain type of oratory skill, certain type of charisma to be able to carry yourself like that. So, and then Tariq Nasheed, I don't follow him too much, but I don't think he puts himself out there to necessarily be a leader. To me, he's someone more so who he's a filmmaker, and he puts himself out there to want to help the institutions of Black people, particularly in Hollywood. So that's how I take him. So in some regard, there certainly are leaders in the Black community, even if they're not the leader or, the leader of a movement, because there's not necessarily a movement attached to a lot of this. A lot of this is hopefully a movement starting. But they are in many regards leaders. And so when you look at that and, look at how they behaved, it just begs the question, what code do we have for our people? Because this isn't anything new. That's the thing that we have to understand. People who have been leaders of movements in the Black community have always had internal fighting. If you are someone that studies history, you know very well that Marcus Garvey, W.E.B. Du Bois went at each other. And honestly, it was probably, for that time, it was probably as embarrassing as what you see between Umar Johnson and Tariq Nasheed, them flexing and everything. And it was embarrassing, having these two people who are, one's, a well-known intellectual, and one's the leader of, Pan-Africanism, or the person who began it, clashing in such a dirty way for all white people to hear and instigate. That's happened before. Not only that, also in the Black Panther Party, a lot of the reason for which the party had, fell apart was because of internal arguments that was instigated by the government. But regardless, they happened between Huey P. Newton and Eldridge Cleaveridge. These two prominent individuals inside of the party had went at each other in disparaging ways, and it had an overall effect on the whole movement. This isn't new, is what I'm trying to say. But the question is, what do we do about it? What do we get from it? What do we hold people up to be leaders? And how do we get people in check? For me personally, although I have followed Umar Johnson and to some degree supported him, this is going to be a difficult one for me to get over. And I say that because if you remember recently, he also had another online dispute with someone. I don't know the guy's name, but if you remember, he was, talking about he was light-skinned and he was a half-breed or something like that, flexing, acting like he's a gangster and all types of other stuff. And, I don't want to say I forgave him, but I said, you know what, everyone has a moment. Even though he spoke way out of turn for someone who has, condemned self-hatred, for him to also go and point at someone for being light-skinned, that was way out of pocket to me. But hey, no one's perfect. But I guess for me, it's kind of like, all right, man, you can say you pro-Black all day. You could say Black love all day. But the question is, when the situation comes up, and that belief that you say you have is being tested. And to me, that's being tested. If he didn't like what Tariq Nasheed said in that video about him, he didn't really say much. It's a funny thing. But if he's someone who practices Black love, and he practices Black power, then if that's what he truly is about in his foundation, he would have not lashed out in sort of a way that basically elevates hatred and elevates division. You get what I'm saying? Same thing with Boyce Watkins. As much as, you know, he's a little more funnier with it because he tries to pretend he like it's kind of like passive aggressive is what it is with the word. It's not necessarily direct. He won't say, "Oh, I don't mess with Umar Johnson," but he'll say, "Well, you know, we've had our problems. I don't have a problem with him, but I know people who have this problem with him and say he did this, but you know, not me," which is being passive aggressive. So all of these people have exhibited themselves negatively. But going into 2018, I think that our view of this should be us trying to figure out as a community what we will and will not stand for. I know for me, I'm going to definitely reevaluate what it is to me for someone to actually be a leader. Because to me, depending on the level that you're on, you know, you have to conduct yourself appropriately. I don't, you know, if someone like on a Martin Luther King level were to conduct themselves like that, we would be done with them. So what are our expectations in 2018? You know? So those are my thoughts. Again, Happy New Year to everyone. I love to see your comments. And, you know, this is just my opinion. Everyone has one, so I love to see yours. All right.